Welcome friends, tonight we're heading into something cold. And I don't mean sweater weather cold, I mean your tea freezes before you finish it cold. We're going back to early 20th century Russia, a time of revolutions, ration cards, long bread lines and suspicious glances from your neighbours. Forget the storming of palaces and dramatic speeches. They happened, sure, but for most people, it was more about keeping your boots dry, guessing who was in charge this week, and hoping no one asked too many questions about your political opinions. So before we settle into the slow unravelling of one of history's most exhausting revolutions, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these long, quiet journeys through the more uncomfortable corners of history. And drop a comment to let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's listening from across the world, some falling asleep, some just starting their day, and a few of you probably curled up under several blankets right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan or some white noise, let your muscles relax, let your breath slow down, because you've just woken up in Petrograd, 1917. It's winter, the factory's closed, there's no coal, and your landlady hasn't smiled since 1905. You're not part of the revolution, you're just trying to survive it. Let's begin. You wake up, but not because you want to. There's no alarm clock, no factory whistle, no reason to get up, really. But the cold always finds you. It pushes through the cracks in the walls and seeps through your blanket. It doesn't matter how many layers you sleep in. Your breath fogs the air. The damp in your socks never really dries. It just rotates from one foot to the other, depending on how you sleep. The ceiling above you is stained with water damage and soot. It creaks when your upstairs neighbour moves, which isn't often. He's older, or sick, or maybe just tired of talking. You sit up, slowly. Your back aches in that dull, familiar way. The kind of stiffness that doesn't scream, it just lingers. You stretch your legs over the edge of the cot, feet hitting the cold floorboards like two forgotten potatoes. The window is iced over. Frost creeps in elegant patterns across the inside of the glass. You press your palm to it and pull back immediately. A thin circle of warmth evaporates within seconds. There's no stove fire this morning. There hasn't been for a few days. You're out of wood, out of coal, out of dried anything. You burned an old table leg 2 nights ago. It was satisfying for a moment. Now the room smells faintly of varnish and defeat. In the corner there's a small ceramic pot with water. It froze sometime during the night. You chip at it with the handle of a spoon until you get enough to drink. It tastes of dust and copper. Your coat is where you left it, hung from a nail in the wall, next to a scarf that used to belong to someone else. You don't remember where you got it. Most of your clothing is like that now. Acquired, passed along, worn by many. You dress slowly, your boots go on last. They don't fit properly anymore. Too loose in the heel, too tight at the toes. You've patched them 3 times with wire and bits of cloth. They squeak when you walk, but they're boots, and boots are more than most people have. Outside, the sky's that familiar Petrograd grey. The kind of grey that has no direction, no light, no edge. Just clouds smeared endlessly across the horizon. You walk down the narrow stairwell, past peeling paint and old notices written in a script no one reads anymore. At street level, the wind is worse. It coils through alleys like a stray dog. It bites your ears, pulls at your coat, slides down the back of your neck like melting ice. You're not walking to work. Not really. The factory stopped running last week, or maybe the week before. First the power was intermittent, then the foreman stopped showing up, then the doors were locked. Now the building just sits there, massive, cold and strangely silent. You still go most mornings, out of habit, out of hope, out of a need to see if someone else might be there, to talk, to trade, to hear something useful. But today, as most days, the yard is empty. One man stands near the gate lighting a cigarette with a shaking hand. He doesn't look up, you don't interrupt. Instead, you continue walking toward the market square. It's not much of a market. Half the stalls are empty, some are boarded shut. The ones that are open sell strange things. Shoes with mismatched laces, cans with no labels, jars of pickled something. You stand near a cart that smells of weak onion soup and overhear an old woman say the trains aren't running again. Something about a labour strike, or bandits, or both. It doesn't matter. It means no flour, no sugar, no coal. You reach into your pocket and pull out your morning's currency, a button, a chipped spoon, and half a bar of soap. You trade the soap for a crust of black bread that's more crust than bread. You chew it slowly. It sticks to your teeth and tastes faintly of mildew. There's a newspaper tacked to a door nearby. You glance at the headline but don't read it. The words are too big, too loud. You've stopped caring what they say. There's always a name, a movement, a proclamation, but never food, never warmth, never something you can hold in your hands. A young red guard walks by, rifle slung casually over his shoulder. His boots are new, clean. He doesn't look at you, but you still turn your face away slightly. Not out of guilt, just precaution. Looking too long is never smart, not anymore. You shuffle back through the icy streets, scarf tight across your face. The cold burns your nostrils. Your breath fogs your scarf until it's damp against your lips. At home, you light a candle. It sputters and gutters and finally catches. You place it on the table and sit beside it, staring into the flame like it might speak. Somewhere outside, a dog barks, then stops. You think about tomorrow and decide not to. You scrape the last crumbs of bread into your mouth. You tuck your coat around you. You lie back on your cot. The ceiling looks the same. You close your eyes and listen for silence, because in this city, silence is safer than questions. And if you're lucky, tomorrow will look exactly like today. The next day begins like the last. Cold, quiet, colourless. You wake up before the sun again, mostly because sleeping is difficult when you can feel your ribs against the cot frame. Your joints ache from the cold. Or maybe it's the mattress, stuffed with straw so old it started turning into dust. You rinse your face with a handful of water from a chipped basin. The water is freezing, and the enamel flakes off into your hand. There's no towel, so you dry your skin with the sleeve of your coat, the one with the elbow patch made from an old tablecloth. Outside, Petrograd moves like an old man getting out of bed, slowly, cautiously, with plenty of creaking. You pass by the bakery. The line is already forming, but the doors are still shut. A soldier stands nearby, not guarding the building, just watching. His hands are in his coat and his eyes are hidden by the shadow of his cap. You nod politely, just in case. He doesn't nod back. A girl in line says something to no one in particular. They say the Tsar's abdicated. Someone else replies, "No, they shot him already." Another voice mutters, No, he's in exile, still wearing a crown." You say nothing. Further down the street, a man in a long coat nails a new poster to a wall. You can't see what it says from here, but you can guess. It's probably about the workers, or the soldiers, or the provisional government, or maybe about how none of those exist anymore, and it's all Soviets now. The truth changes so quickly that you've stopped trying to keep track. At the corner, a pamphlet blows across the street, half soaked from slush. You step over it. You used to read them. Now they all blur together. Calls for revolution, for resistance, for loyalty to someone you've never met. They all sound the same when your stomach growls. The posters say things like peace, bread and land. You haven't seen peace in months. Bread is rationed. Land is a rumour. But it's not just slogans anymore. Now there are uniforms, red armbands, red stars, red flags, everything's red. Even the sky sometimes when the chimneys are burning late. The men wearing red look young, barely old enough to shave. They walk with purpose, but they look at each other more than they look ahead. Like they're waiting to be told what to do next. Like they're still learning the parts of their own play. You hear names, whispered like spells. Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin. Sometimes someone says Kerensky and someone else spits. You remember the Tsar's name? You remember how it used to be printed in gold on every coin? Now it's said only in quiet corners or in mockery. They say the Bolsheviks are in charge, but no one told you what a Bolshevik actually is. They say the Soviets are running the city, but no one told you where to find one. They say Lenin returned in a sealed train from Germany. Some say he was smuggled in. Some say he's a traitor. Some say he's the future. But none of them tell you how to get bread, or fuel, or if you still need to show your work card at the checkpoint. Back in the market, a man sells buttons for sugar. Another sells kerosene in reused wine bottles. A woman offers to trade a winter hat for a tin of fish that may or may not be from last year. You trade an empty bottle for a strip of cloth soaked in vinegar. It doesn't do anything, but it smells like effort. Someone bumps into you. They don't apologise. You don't ask why. On the walk home, you pass a group gathered around a speaker. He's standing on a crate reading from a pamphlet. He's loud. He uses words like bourgeoisie and reactionary. His coat is nicer than yours. His voice is steady. His eyes dart constantly. You pause just for a second, not to listen, just to see who's watching him. You notice the soldier again, still nearby, still silent, still not smiling. You go home by a different street just in case. That night the candle burns low, the shadows are longer, the windows rattle in the wind, and the doorframe whistles every time someone passes in the hallway. There's no news, no radio, no certainty, just rumours and soup and the slow creak of the revolution turning on its hinge. You lie in bed and stare at the ceiling again. You try to remember what life was like before. Before the posters, before the slogans, before you had to watch your words as closely as you watch the weather. But it's hard, and your stomach growls, and you hope tomorrow is quiet, or at least not worse. You've been hearing the name more and more now, Lenin. You see it in posters, you hear it on the corners, in whispered conversations between neighbours who didn't talk much before. No one says Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov. That version of the man is gone, exiled, erased, replaced. He's just Lenin now, sharp and short like a hammer strike. A name meant to be printed in bold, easy to remember, easy to chant. But he hasn't always been here. In fact, not long ago he wasn't in Russia at all. Let's go back a few months, back to April 1917. The Tsar had already abdicated, the Romanovs were under house arrest, the provisional government had moved into place. It was supposed to be a new chapter, a kind of cautious democracy, shared power, temporary calm, but there was no calm, food was still scarce, soldiers were still dying, peasants still had no land, workers still had no voice, the streets still boiled with impatience. Into this tension came Lenin by train, of all things. Not just any train, a sealed one, courtesy of the German Empire. It sounds like the setup for a joke. Germany helps send a revolutionary into Russia, hoping he'll collapse the war effort from within, and it works. Not all at once, not with a bang, but slowly, cunningly, like water eroding stone. When Lenin steps onto the platform at the Finland station, he looks nothing like a revolutionary icon. He's short, sickly, tightly wound in a cheap overcoat. But his eyes seem to see something others don't. Not what is, but what must be. The Bolsheviks greet him, but cautiously. Some don't expect much. He hasn't been on the streets. He hasn't seen the barricades. He hasn't waited in line for bread. But Lenin doesn't need to see things to know how they must go. He's already written it, and rewritten it. He walks to the podium and speaks. Not to the crowd, not to the press, but to history. He says, "The war must end immediately. The provisional government must be dismantled. The Soviets, the local workers' councils, must hold all power. And yes, the land must go to the peasants, factories to the workers, everything to the people. It's a lot. Even many Bolsheviks think it's too much. But Lenin doesn't care. He doesn't make arguments. He makes frameworks. He doesn't wait for votes. He writes pamphlets, every night, for months, one after another. And in the background, slowly, quietly, the Bolsheviks grow. While the provisional government talks, Lenin organises. While soldiers desert, Lenin promises peace. While workers strike, Lenin sends speakers into the factories. Then, in October, just 7 months after his return, he strikes, not with fire, not with fury, but with paperwork and planning. The October Revolution is nothing like the storming of the Bastille. There's no grand fight, no thunderous crowd. The Bolsheviks take Petrograd by simply walking in. Red Guards seize the railway stations, then the bridges, then the telegraph office. The Winter Palace, the seat of the government, is taken almost anticlimactically. A handful of defenders, a few gunshots, a short standoff, then surrender. The provisional government is arrested. Politely mostly. It doesn't feel like a revolution. Not the kind you imagined. In fact, most of Petrograd wakes up the next day and shrugs. The same buildings stand, the same lines form for bread, the same rumours circulate about who's really in charge, but the headlines change, the seals on the documents change, the tone shifts. Now there are people's decrees. Now there are commissars. Now everything is about the Soviets, though it's unclear who they actually represent anymore. And Lenin, he sits in a cold office behind a wooden desk writing more. The war is not over, the famine is not over, the chaos is far from over, but for Lenin, that doesn't matter. Because the machinery of revolution is turning now. Not fast, not loud, but steadily. And he's the one holding the blueprint. The revolution has happened. The provisional government is gone. The Soviets are officially in charge. The factories are nationalised, the land is redistributed, the war officially is over, and yet nothing feels finished. The city is still cold, the ration cards are still thin, and the speeches keep coming. Lenin writes faster than most people can read. His decrees arrive like winter drafts, regular, icy, and never optional. He issues laws about peace, about property, about the church, about marriage, education, wages, time itself. The calendar changes, the clocks are reset, even the alphabet starts to shift. He tries to rebuild the world with pens and pamphlets, but the world doesn't follow that easily. By 1918, civil war breaks out, Reds against Whites, and while Russia is splitting at the seams, Lenin is unwell, always pale, always coughing, always pushing through the pain with the kind of quiet stubbornness you expect from a man who never smiles. You hear rumours, everyone does, that he's had a stroke, that his voice slurs now, that he can't write without trembling, that his speeches come in whispers, relayed through assistants, but the papers still publish his name, the posters still carry his face. The cult of Lenin begins before the man is even finished, and while he weakens, something else is growing in the quiet corners of the party. A man with a moustache, a man who doesn't talk much, but listens, a man who organises schedules, who records every meeting, who builds influence not with force, but with appointments. Joseph Stalin. Officially, he's the General Secretary, a clerk, a background presence. Unofficially, he's learning who controls what, who speaks to whom, who owes favours, who might need replacing. Lenin notices too late. In the last year of his life, Lenin becomes suspicious of Stalin. He writes warnings. He drafts letters urging his removal. He calls him rude, dangerous, ambitious. But by then, his voice is too weak. His allies are scattered. His papers are intercepted. And Stalin smiles without smiling. In 1922, Lenin has another stroke. Then another. He can no longer speak. His right hand fails him. He can no longer write. A man built from words now lives in silence. He spends his final months in a quiet house outside Moscow. A nurse feeds him soup. His wife reads him articles. The party visits less and less. By the time he dies in January 1924, he's no longer steering the ship. He's just the figurehead. And as he is embalmed, mourned, and laid into a mausoleum, the real work continues. Behind doors, in meetings, in reshuffled committees, no speeches, no coups, just a quiet shuffle of chairs. Stalin doesn't seize power. He inherits it piece by piece. He says little. He waits longer. He steps forward only when there's no one left to stand in his way. And so, as Lenin's image is painted on banners and carved into statues, the man himself fades. His revolution, sharp, idealistic, fiery, gives way to something colder, something slower, something made not of slogans but of silence. And you go to the breadline again tomorrow. You nod when someone mentions Lenin, you frown thoughtfully when someone mentions Stalin, and you say nothing at all when they both disappear behind a curtain of snow. The newspapers call it a civil war, but out here, on the edge of some muddy village that's changed names 3 times in 2 years, it feels less like a war and more like weather. It rolls in, changes everything, and leaves before you've finished asking what just happened. You don't hear about battles until after they're over, sometimes not even then. There are no maps, no announcements, just soldiers arriving, dirty, tired, usually hungry, and asking questions you don't want to answer. Sometimes they wear red armbands, sometimes white, sometimes green or black, or no colours at all. At first you tried to keep track. You wanted to know who was winning, who to agree with, who to avoid. But after the 6th or 7th time someone demanded your only goat in the name of the people, you stopped asking who they were. They all want something, and they all say they're the future. You live on the outskirts now. The city was too dangerous, too loud, too filled with eyes and lists. Out here there's a barn, a stove, and a creek that hasn't frozen all the way through. That's enough. The days are grey, the nights are darker. Time passes, not in weeks or months, but in how many potatoes are left. How many candles remain. How many neighbours you haven't seen lately. Some left, some vanished. Some are just quiet now. One day, a group of red soldiers appears at the edge of the woods. You see them before they see you. You duck behind the fence and watch. They're young, so young. Wrapped in mismatched coats, rifles slung over narrow shoulders. One of them limps, another sings quietly, badly. They don't look like an army. They look like a lost school group. They don't stay long. They speak to the elder, take his boots, leave behind a handwritten note promising compensation from the revolution. No one expects to be paid. 2 days later, white troops come. They don't ask questions. They take your tea kettle, tear up the Bolshevik note, and remind everyone that traitors will hang. You don't argue. You smile tightly and say nothing. After they're gone, you bury your extra ration bag behind the shed just in case. In the distance, you hear something. It might be artillery, it might be thunder, it might be nothing. The trees are quiet again by dusk. A deer wanders past. Nature doesn't pick sides. You boil water for a single potato. You let it simmer too long so the starch makes the broth cloudy. You stretch it into a meal. The barn creaks in the wind. The sky turns dark blue, then darker still. You light a stub of candle and pull your coat around you like a second skin. You think briefly of the cities, of Petrograd, of Moscow, of the debates happening by lamplight, of men in sharp coats arguing about dialectical materialism while you try to keep the mice out of your grain sack. You wonder who controls the capital now. The papers said the whites were advancing, then the reds pushed them back. Then some general declared himself supreme ruler, then someone else assassinated him. None of it changed the fact that you haven't seen sugar in 6 months. You lie on your cot and trace the patterns of the rafters with your eyes. The wind rattles loose boards. An owl calls from the trees. Somewhere men are fighting, freezing, marching across snowfields in the name of an idea. And you? You just want to make it to spring, with both boots, with your name still unreported, with no visitors. Because every time someone knocks at the door, it could be a soldier, or a deserter, or a man with a list, and you no longer have anything left to give. Not your food, not your firewood, not your opinion. You're tired of watching sides change, of watching flags come and go, of watching the same words rearranged by different mouths. It's not a civil war anymore, it's a season, long, bleak, and best endured without comment. They keep telling you what this war is about. Every time someone passes through your village, or what's left of it, they put up new posters. One says, "For the workers," another says, "For the fatherland." Then comes death to the traitors, protect the revolution, defend holy Russia, peace through strength, bread, land, and truth. You've stopped reading them. You can tell who posted them based on the style. The reds use bold fonts and clean red stars. The whites use ornate borders and orthodox crosses. The greens, whoever they are, sometimes stencil wolves. The anarchists just use black paint, usually misspelled. They all tell you who the enemy is. None of them tell you where to get medicine. None of them bring firewood. Winter came early this year. Or maybe it just never left. The ground outside is either ice or mud, depending on the hour. Your boots have given up. You line them with grass when you can, or pages from a torn political leaflet. Typhus spread through the village last week. Quietly at first. Then the coughing began, then the fevers. You boil everything now. Dishes, clothes, water, hope. The local doctor left months ago. Or he was taken. Or he joined the whites. Or maybe he froze in the forest trying to get to Petrograd. No one's sure anymore. The old woman next door died yesterday. You heard the wailing. By afternoon it had stopped. By morning, her door was nailed shut. She was the last person who knew how to pickle anything properly. You remember when there were songs in the evenings? Someone would play the balalaika, someone else would hum. Now silence feels safer than singing. The younger men are gone, some conscripted, some joined willingly, some disappeared, probably buried in a ditch somewhere between 2 towns that no longer exist on any current map. You've learned to hide your food well, not from thieves but from neighbours. Desperation makes strangers of everyone. You once shared potatoes with a man who later turned in your cousin for hoarding. The cousin never came back. The man now walks with a limp and refuses to make eye contact. That's how it is now. No fights, just eyes that look away. Just trust that evaporates like steam from thin broth. The mud is everywhere. It sticks to everything. It fills the gaps between your floorboards. It sucks at your boots when you walk to the well. It clings to the wheels of supply wagons that never stop here. It mixes with blood, with ash, with the melting snow. You spend part of each day patching holes in your roof, and the other part watching the horizon for horses. You don't ask questions anymore. When men with rifles arrive, you nod and point toward the next village. When they ask for food, you lie and say you've already given it. When they ask about sympathies, you say only this: "I'm tired." It works. Most of the time. You hear stories of battles. Not first hand, just rumours. Kazan, Tsaritsyn, Yekaterinburg. One side advances, then retreats, then returns under a new name. The Whites say they're restoring order. The Reds say they're building a new world. You see neither. You just see men with dull eyes and cracked lips, walking through your fields and leaving your tools broken. Someone stole your potatoes last night. You don't know who. You don't bother asking. You'd have done the same. So you sit on a stool in your shed, spooning cold cabbage water into your mouth, listening to distant thunder, or artillery you're not sure anymore, and wonder how long a civil war can go before there's nothing left to fight over. You hear it might be ending soon, that one side is winning. You don't care, because whichever side it is, you know they'll arrive hungry, tired, and full of promises you've already heard. Let's step out of the cold, just for a little while. Not into comfort. Not exactly, but into a different kind of discomfort. The kind found behind polished wooden doors, beneath flickering gas lamps and inside committee rooms that smell faintly of ink, wax and boiled cabbage. This is Moscow now. Petrograd still matters, but Moscow is where things happen, where the chairs are more expensive and so is the paranoia. Here, inside a former noble's home now repurposed for the revolution, the Bolshevik leadership meets. The ceiling is high, the chandeliers dusty. The wallpaper has been stripped down, but the bones of luxury still show through. Cracks, velvet-covered armchairs, and a marble fireplace that no one uses because fuel is being rationed for the greater cause. The air is tense, always. The men who gather here, mostly men, speak in clipped sentences. They are cold, but never uncomposed. Their moustaches are trimmed, their collars stiff, their notebooks full. They drink tea, weak. Sometimes it's reheated several times. Sometimes it's more hot water than tea. Sometimes it's shared between 3 people and served in chipped porcelain that still bears a Romanov crest. You can imagine yourself seated along the wall saying nothing, observing everything. Across the room sits Leon Trotsky, sharp-jawed, intense, always tapping something. A pen, a coin, a fingernail against the table. He's not like Lenin. Where Lenin was quiet certainty, Trotsky is energetic insistence. He talks quickly, commands attention, makes enemies without trying. He's the architect of the Red Army now, organised it from scratch, took scattered militias, rogue battalions, former Tsarist officers, and turned it into something that wins battles. Wears wire-rimmed glasses, writes faster than he breathes, carries a revolver, not for show. He debates constantly, with Stalin, with Zinoviev, with Kamenev, with anyone who pauses too long before agreeing with him. He uses words like a hammer, always swung with force but sometimes hitting the wrong nail. Outside, the country is falling apart, but in here, the arguments continue. Should grain requisition be expanded or softened? Should international revolution be pursued now or later? Is the civil war over or simply paused? Trotsky says one thing, Stalin mutters another. Stalin doesn't debate. He listens, he files things away. He notices who hesitates, who aligns, who repeats phrases that sound too Menshevik, and he builds something of his own. Not with slogans, but with relationships, with appointments, with silence. The meetings go long, hours pass, candles burn down, the tea goes cold. Some nights there are toasts, not celebratory, just ritual. Vodka poured into mismatched glasses. Toast to victory, a toast to the people, a toast to Lenin, even though he hasn't spoken in over a year. No one toasts Trotsky, he notices. There is talk of Germany, of Poland, of the party line. There is less talk of food, or housing, or the villagers who burned their last table for heat. But that's not this room's job. This room is for strategy, for purity of doctrine, for determining who is and isn't with the revolution. Outside, snow drifts against the windows. Inside, coats remain buttoned even as voices rise. No one takes theirs off. No one relaxes. You don't get comfortable in a room where any one of your comrades might report your phrasing. Because the revolution is still young, still vulnerable and still surrounded by enemies, and according to some, you might be one of them. So the meetings continue. The minutes are taken, the arguments grow colder, the tone more clipped, and each night someone leaves just a little more isolated than when they arrived. Outside, the people wait in line for bread that never comes. Inside, the party debates the meaning of bread. It's 1922 now, or maybe 1923. No one's sure anymore. The calendar changed, the clocks shifted, the language itself is slowly being rewritten. but the hunger feels the same. In Moscow, it's cold again. Still. Perpetually. Like the revolution never stopped marching and just settled into the bones of the buildings. You walk past government offices where once golden door frames are now painted red. Inside, the rooms are warm. There's tea, sometimes sausage. The chairs are nicer, the boots are polished. The words are sharp. The city outside those doors is starving. A famine has taken root across the country, 5 million dead or dying. Entire provinces turn silent. Trains stop running. Villages vanish beneath snowdrifts and dust. And inside those party halls they talk. Not about food, not really. They talk about policy, about the new economic plan, about temporary market concessions, about the danger of deviationism, about Trotsky's excessive individualism, about proletarian purity, about dialectics, about everything that isn't hunger. Because hunger is not political theory, and theory is the only safe currency left. Trotsky still speaks forcefully, still commands attention, still storms out of meetings when ignored. But something has changed. The others don't challenge him as often. They nod, they murmur, they scribble notes, and afterward they speak with someone else. Not Trotsky, someone quieter, someone watching, someone with a moustache and no need for outbursts. Stalin. He never yells, he never interrupts, he doesn't inspire, he arranges. By 1924, Lenin is dead. His heart failed, or his enemies didn't. Maybe both. He lies in a mausoleum now, embalmed, eternal, symbolic. And as the official mourning begins, the real power struggle ends before it starts. Trotsky makes speeches. Stalin makes lists. Trotsky publishes essays. Stalin rewrites membership rolls. Trotsky quotes Marx. Stalin removes photographs. By the time anyone notices it's already done, the committees shrink, the alliances dissolve, the names vanish from the newspapers. Trotsky, once the voice of the revolution is reassigned, then exiled, then forgotten. For now. And Stalin, he doesn't declare himself the winner. He doesn't need to, he just keeps showing up. To every meeting, on every document, in every conversation whispered behind closed doors, until no one else is left. No rivals, no dissenters, no question. Only one voice remains, measured, flat, unsmiling and outside, and still the breadlines, still the cold, still the people waiting beneath faded posters and hollow promises. The revolution has succeeded. It has an office, it has a slogan, it has a leader, and it has silence, not peace, not calm, just a quiet that spreads through the halls and alleys like smoke from a smouldering fire. You go home, another meeting is scheduled, another pamphlet is printed, another comrade doesn't come back, and still, the party debates. It doesn't happen all at once. There is no great thunderclap, no single speech, no bold declaration that the revolution is over and something darker has begun. It just hardens, like concrete poured quietly at night, like frost creeping up the inside of your windows, like a heavy silence that becomes too familiar to notice. Stalin is in charge now. Officially, he's still just one voice among many. General Secretary Comrade Stalin, a man of the party. Unofficially, he's everywhere, in the meetings, in the margins of documents, in the silences between sentences. After Lenin's death in 1924, power becomes less about ideology and more about survival. You either align or you vanish. There's no ceremony, just a shift in tone. The first years are quiet, on the surface at least. Then come the 5-year plans. You've probably seen the posters, smiling workers, smokestacks rising, wheat fields stretching toward the horizon. The slogans say, "Steel is the spine of the new Soviet man. Forward with socialism, bread, peace and electrification." But behind the wheat there are whispers. Behind the steel there are broken backs. And behind the smiles there are quotas. Factories are built. Cities appear where none existed before. Dams, canals, railroads, and bodies. You don't see those in the posters. Peasants are told to give up their land, voluntarily of course, to join collective farms where all property is shared and the future is efficient. Those who resist are labelled kulaks, a word that once just meant farmer with a horse, now means enemy of the people. You know what happens next. Trucks arrive, families are pulled from homes. Some are sent to Siberia, some disappear, some are simply replaced. Farms are reorganised, tools break, grain spoils, the quotas remain. In 1932 in Ukraine and other regions the harvests fail or are seized. The state demands more, the people have less. You don't call it a famine. Officially it doesn't exist, but you hear about it. You see it in the eyes of travellers, in the sunken cheeks of refugees, in the way some people look at bread crusts like they're made of gold. Millions die, quietly. The snow covers the bodies. The papers print record grain yields. You keep working. You keep nodding. You keep saying the right things in public because you've noticed something else too. People are vanishing again. Not just peasants, not just dissidents, but poets, teachers, engineers, party members. One day the man who managed your apartment building is gone. The next day someone else is in his office wearing his coat. You don't ask questions. You attend meetings. You clap when you're supposed to. You recite slogans that no longer mean anything, but saying them wrong still means everything. Then come the purges. First, it's the party. Senior officials, old revolutionaries, men who marched with Lenin. Stalin calls them traitors, wreckers, foreign agents. Confessions appear. Long, detailed, unbelievable. You know they were tortured. Everyone does. But the newspapers print their words and the public trials are broadcast by radio. You listen, you nod, you repeat. Because next it's the military, then the artists, then the managers, then the random citizens. It doesn't matter what you've done. Only who accuses you. You've learned the rhythms now. Late night knock. Leather boots in the stairwell. Door opens. No explanation. If you're lucky, they take you to a camp. If not, you don't come back at all. The NKVD, Stalin's secret police, expands its reach. There are quotas for arrests. There are targets to meet. There are rewards for loyalty and consequences for hesitation. A neighbour once joked softly that the only safe place is the cemetery. You didn't laugh. Neither did he. You write less now, speak less, dream less. Some people disappear from photos, literally. Old group pictures are reprinted with faces scrubbed out. The history books quietly revise themselves. Heroes are removed. Stalin's chapter gets longer. The only safe memory is the one you forget. And then, just as suddenly, it stops. The purges slow, the arrests quiet down, the posters change again. Now they say, defend the motherland. Industrialize for peace. Stalin is the father of nations. It's 1939 now, and across the continent the world starts to crack again. You hear about Germany, about Hitler, about troops marching through Poland, about treaties signed in secret. You don't understand it all, you don't need to. You just know the borders are shifting again, and the air feels strange. Then, in 1941, the sky changes. In the early hours of June 22nd, planes roar overhead. They bear crosses, not stars. Operation Barbarossa, the German invasion. Suddenly the posters don't matter, the plans don't matter, the speeches are replaced by air raid sirens. The Red Army reels, the front collapses, cities burn, and you? You wonder, briefly, quietly, will the Germans be liberators? Will they be better? Will they bring food? Peace? Of course not. Probably not. Almost certainly not, but still, you think it, for just a moment, and then you say nothing, because hope is dangerous, and memory is sharp, and history keeps going. And now the long night settles. You've made it through revolution, through civil war, through famine, through purges, through silence, and somehow you're still here, not whole, not untouched, but still breathing. You watched empires fall and new ones rise, each promising a future you were never invited into. You saw neighbours vanish in the name of justice. You waited in line for food that never came. You learned to speak carefully and to think even more carefully. You saw flags change colour, cities change names, streets renamed again and again and again. You learned how quickly hope becomes suspicion, how easily loyalty turns into liability, how surviving means being smaller than history, just quiet enough to avoid its footsteps. And now, as another war begins, you lie in a room with no heat. The wind rattles the glass. There's a picture of Lenin on the wall, faded but still watching. You pull your blanket higher and try not to think about tomorrow, because tomorrow means conscription, or invasion, or betrayal, or nothing. Maybe that's what the revolution gave you. Not freedom, not bread, not land, but the quiet ability to endure, to sleep through chaos, to whisper through storms, to live without being seen. So tonight, you let go. Let go of the speeches, let go of the slogans, Let go of the names and the banners and the causes that took more than they gave, because none of them are here now. Just you, and a blanket, and a ceiling that hasn't changed in 20 years. And maybe, if you're lucky, you'll dream of silence. The kind that isn't fear, the kind that isn't hunger, the kind that just lets you rest. Sleep well. You've survived enough history for tonight.